The Amber Alert Podcast.
Welcome back, Amber Alert Podcast. This is episode 107, part 2. I am your host, Amber Starkey. It's great to be here on a Friday, May 1st. And as I said, this is, if you follow this podcast, for the three of you who do, we always talk about something in part 2, which is, it might be a conspiracy theory. It might be, I try to only talk about things that I do think are true. Maybe one or two times I've covered something that I didn't necessarily buy. But usually I try to talk about something that, even if it isn't true, there's some evidence for it and it's worth considering. This, I believe, is 100% true. This is coming from Troy Brewer, who, if you don't know who he is, I'll give you a quick rundown. I believe he pastors a church near Dallas. But I know for sure he has a ministry where they rescue kids out of human trafficking. And what got him started doing that is he was in the Philippines years ago, and someone approached him and tried to sell a kid to him. And Troy Brewer was so disgusted and angry and like heartbroken that someone just seeing him as a white, like, American, they just assumed you're going to be looking for kids. You're going to want to buy kids. He said so he realized what a common thing it was. And it so messed with him that he and his wife, then they started a ministry where they rescue kids out of human trafficking. And they since then have rescued thousands of them, thousands. And, so it's a great thing that he does. So he, in this video that we're going to listen, he's being interviewed by one of my favorite people, Dr. L.A. Marzulli, who I would say is probably the authority on UFOs and UAPs, but from a Christian perspective. So why I appreciate him is he looks at everything through the lens of the Bible, which I believe is the only way you can stay grounded in the truth. Because I like conspiracy theories. I think they're interesting, and more often than not, they are true. However, you have to be careful. You have to stay grounded in truth. Otherwise, you'll turn into a lunatic. You will literally end up a person who basically thinks you're living in a sim. Oh, nothing's real. I don't believe anything's real. Like, hey, why don't you put just a little tiny cut in your skin? You'll bleed. Okay. You're real. You're flesh and blood. You need to go touch grass. Okay. It's real. It's growing. It's like, it's bristly. Go touch grass, go pet your dog. They're real and they're amazing. They're very cute. Like you're living in real life. Okay. It's not a sim, but you have people who've, gone so deep into conspiracy theories that they're actually are at the point, I don't even think the sky's real. I don't think people are people. I think we're all robots. There are people who think birds aren't real, that they're all like drones of some kind. I'm not saying they haven't made drones to look like birds, but birds drop out of the sky and they are flesh and blood. I actually finally hit one with my car, and it felt like winning a video game. Because I've tried for years. It actually irritated me. I'm not like a sadist, but like it irritated me how birds can be in the middle of the road and they fly away at the last second. Always. You can be sure you're going to hit them and they'll fly away. So finally I was like, I'm going to eventually hit one just because I want to, because they always get away. So I finally hit one and I felt accomplished. Anyway, so you have to be careful. And I think the only way, here's the thing, if nothing is true and nothing is real, then you can fall for anything. You have nothing to anchor you, right? And you have to have a source of truth to keep you anchored, or you'll turn into a complete lunatic. So for me, that truth is the Bible. And so when I find out about something, or wow, that sounds insane, could that be true? Is that real? First, obviously, you want to make sure it has enough evidence to support, yes, this could be a real thing. But I also want to look at it through the lens of scripture. If this thing is real, does it violate scripture? And if it does, then I'm tossing it out. For example, aliens. I do not believe that the Bible allows for the existence of aliens in the way that they're framed or described in movies. That they're basically, or people like Dr. Stephen Greer, God bless him, but like he thinks aliens are real, just extraterrestrial life that's like out there, maybe from the Pleiades, maybe they were on Mars at some point. They're not good or bad necessarily, but they're just other intelligent life out there. I think that violates scripture, because the Bible that we have tells us about Earth. And this thing revolves around people. God's primary focus is people, human beings, which are made in his image. So you have characters in the Bible. You have God Almighty, who is the truth, who's the source of every good thing. You have Satan, who's been defeated, by the way. So you don't want to be unaware of him, but like, you also don't want to blow him up into something that he's not, because people live in fear of the devil and not in fear of God, and that's twisted. If you're an unbeliever, then you should probably be scared of the devil, but as a Christian, you understand he's under your feet and he's a liar, so everything's a deception. But so you have God, and then you have heavenly angels, which are good ministers of fire. They're sent out, they help us. And then you have Satan's camp, which consists of fallen angels, which Satan's technically a fallen angel. And then you have demons, you have evil spirits, but like, that's it, right? You have God, Satan, and people. And people can choose. People are supposed to take the God side. Not everybody does, unfortunately, but you're going to pick one or the other. There is no third option where it's like, I want to be neutral. I don't want either side. That doesn't exist. And when people talk about aliens, that's essentially what they are like some third party out there, which aren't necessarily good or bad. Some people think they're good. Some people think they're bad. Some people think they're just, they want to be left alone. Maybe they're curious about us, but they want to be left alone. They're just like out there, and they're sort of like us, like they're intelligent life. You don't find that in the Bible. Everything falls into one of those three categories: evil, good, and people. And people are the wild card. When like at my church, they give altar calls, right? God has already voted for you. The devil's already voted against you. You cast the deciding ballot. Do I want to go to heaven, or am I going to go to hell? And you literally decide. So, anyway, so a biblical worldview is what I have. So when it comes to this subject, this is a giant that was seen in Mexico. And before you're like, oh, that's insane. The Bible talks about giants a lot, actually. I think it's like 30 some different races of giants that are listed in the Old Testament. And what's interesting about them is they're never good. They are never good. And the people of God, when he's telling the Israelites, go possess the land I've given you, make your way into the promised land that I promised to Abraham and his descendants forever, there are giants in the land, and you're going to have to kill them. Notice that God wasn't like, you can coexist with them because they're also people in my image. No, he was like, you go wipe everything out, even the animals there, like literally wipe everything out. Why is there not an ounce of mercy? God has mercy for people, evil people. And there never was an ounce of mercy where giants were involved. Never. The flood. Everyone, the popular view is that the flood was just a divine judgment from God because of the sin on the earth. But a lot of people miss the verses leading up to the flood. The sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they gave birth to the Nephilim. Sons of God as fallen angels, daughters of men as human beings. There was an unholy union there. They were never supposed to hook up, but they did. And then what was born out of that was the Nephilim, which were the giants. And then right after this happens, God's like, I'm flooding the earth. I'm literally going to factory reset this place. And he saved one family, Noah and his family, who the Bible says they were pure, which I don't think that means just righteous, like they loved God, but they were pure, meaning their bloodline had not been corrupted by the Nephilim, the giants. They weren't human. So he floods the earth to destroy them, but then it says they're on the flood after that, or they're on the earth after that. After the flood, they come back And this is when, notice how God commands the people to do what the flood did. The flood wiped them all out, and then God promised, I'll never flood the earth again like that. So then he tells his people, when you encounter these giants, you kill them. Don't coexist. Don't try to be friends. Literally kill every last one of them. They were not human. And God doesn't have any mercy towards something that isn't human. And I don't mean, obviously he cares for animals that he made, but I'm talking about something evil, the seed of the serpent, the seed of Satan, he has no mercy for. So, when we talk about giants, now I don't think that these are seen often. What are they? If someone sees a giant now, say in 2026, this happened. I'm not sure when this happened. If Troy Brewer is going to say, he talked about it last year and I just found out about it. I don't think they're seen often, but I do think they're seen often enough that there are people who know there are giants there's a giant living in that mountain, in that cave, in this area. We'll get into the Kandahar giant and stuff too. I believe they're around, but they're not seen very often. And maybe they are, I think they're the Nephilim that the Bible talks about. Now, how old are they? I don't know. If you're not human, I'm guessing you don't age as a human either. So obviously no person is going to live 2,000 years or 3, 4, can these things be that old? If you're not I don't know. I don't think like demons age. I don't think the angels that have been with God since the beginning, I don't think that they're aging to the point they've died from old age. I don't think it affects spiritual things like it does natural things. And these things, yes, they're here in the natural, but they're not natural because they're not human. So how old are they? I don't know. And I don't know if they've been reproducing with each other and they're staying hidden. I believe when you read the book of Revelation, when it talks about some of the things that are going to happen on this earth, it's going to get crazy. Different types of creatures that are going to attack people. You have angels that are bound at the great river Euphrates. They're chained and restrained right now because the time is not yet. We're not in the tribulation. And so they're restrained. They're held back until the time they get released to go do what they're going to do. So it's going to get crazy on this earth, like crazy. And I don't expect to be here. But that being said, maybe these giants, the ones that are still around, who knows how old they are restrained for the time being. And that's why you might catch a glimpse like Troy Brewer did and some other people have, but it's not like they're just walking around with us. They would get killed, There are tons of stories. Native Americans talk about it. They can be killed, obviously. Giants can be killed. This happened in Kandahar. Anyway, I don't want to get ahead of myself because after we listen to this interview, and I may pause it periodically, but after we listen to it, I'm going to give you just a quick summary of some other stories that are similar. So what he's saying is not actually, it's not the first it's been heard. Other people have shared similar stories. I actually have a second video. It's very short. It came out before AI was on the scene. So for anyone who wants to quickly say, oh, that's just AI, that's doctored, people have already tried to debunk the footage. And no one credible agrees that the footage has been doctored. The only questions are who originally filmed it and where exactly that it is. No one's debating whether it's real footage. They just don't know the origin for sure. But anyway, let's go ahead and listen to Troy Brewer. To give you the background, what he's talking about. So again, he rescues kids out of human trafficking. So he's down in Mexico and he's there to rescue kids. And there are a bunch of pastors gathered around him to pray for him. And if you think that's weird, whatever. So they're all praying for him. And most of them, he's in Mexico, so they're speaking Spanish and he can't really speak Spanish. And he said, it takes a long time. Like there's tons of people praying for me. I'm just sitting down. They're all around me, so I don't really have anything to do. So while he's sitting there, he just starts looking at the ridge out in front of him, and he focuses on this one tree that's kind of by itself. He's like, you know what? I think I'll draw that. I can't leave. I'm going to be here while I'll just draw this this view in front of me. So he sent his son to go get his journal, and then this is when he starts to see what he sees, and I'll let him explain it to you. It's a fascinating story. Here he is, Troy Brewer. Can you tell he's from Texas?
Nice, polite prayer. We'll get together, we'll bow our heads, and it'll be prayed. No, that's not how it works at all. And these mountains are absolutely amazing. They're 18,000 feet tall. You compare that to the Rocky Mountains that are 14,000 feet tall. It's, when I say it's mountainous, it's something else. Wow. Well, they take me to this one spot that they have that where they go to pray, and they own the territory, where they literally own the land. And that's also important. And we go there and we're sitting there. They sit me in a chair, and these 20, 30 some odd people gather together, and one by one they prayed for me. And it is, without exaggerating, almost an all-day event where you sit in a chair, and if you don't speak the language, there's really not much to do but just say, "Yes, Lord." And from all, they all lay hands on you and they pray for you one after another after another. And so I like to draw, and I carry a journal with me everywhere. And so I thought, well, there's nothing to do. They've been praying for me for a couple of hours, and we're outside. There's mountain ridges everywhere. It's so beautiful. And I thought, I'm going to draw that mountain ridge right up there. And so I started mapping it out. I yelled at my son, who was there, and I had several of my executive team was there. And I was like, hey, well, they weren't listening. They were off talking. And so I was like, bring me my journal so I can draw. And I'm looking at this one bald ridge, and there's one single tree, LA, on this bald ridge that's just beautiful. It has stuck out to me. So I thought, well, so I'll spend the next hour or so doing it. I'm just going to draw this thing. So I started mapping out my mind, how I'll draw the rocks that are around it, what kind of scenery, or if anything, am I going to put behind it, what's in the foreground. So I'm really looking at this thing. I'm inspecting it. And so I yelled at my son. He came over. I said, go give me my journal. I'm going to draw that tree up there. And he said, okay. So he goes to the truck to go get it. While I'm there, I look back up, and instead of there being one tree, there's two trees standing there. This really struck me because I had mapped it out already in my mind exactly how I was going to approach this pencil drawing. And I'm looking at it, and I go, I know for a fact that there was only one tree there. How did I miss this other tree? And as I'm pondering and as I'm looking at it, I'm staring at it, and I thought, this other tree looks identical to this one tree. I mean, you cannot tell the difference. And I was like, I can't believe I'm just trying to figure that out. And then all of a sudden, and again, people are praying for me. So there's all these people, and they're praying, they're passionately praying. I'm praying Psalms 91 protection over us, or they're declaring, all I say it every night. Yeah, right on. And so I just sitting there, and I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden, this thing gets blurry. It lost its, for just a split second, it was not a sharp image. It became a kind of a fuzzy image, and two arms and two legs came out of it. It turned into something humanoid as I was looking at this thing, and it took a couple of steps over, and it repositioned itself, and then it instantly looked exactly like a tree again. And I had no grid for this. I was like, okay, I'd never seen anything like that, but I had never experienced anything like that before. And it kind of took my breath away. And I was like, okay.
I think that would make anybody pinch themselves or smack themselves in the face. You would think you're going insane. First of all, how did this tree get here? I know there was one. And then to see it have arms and legs and move, yeah, you would probably be questioning reality at that point.
Hey. So I'm staring at it, and I continue to stare at it. And once again, it takes on a humanoid form. It repositions itself again, and it leaned way in, and it kind of cocked its ear. And it was as if it was listening to the prayer that these people were praying for us. Yeah, there you go. We're praying for me and my team. And it's pretty far away. I have a big range out in West Texas, and we have an 800-yard target range, and this thing was probably about 700, 800 yards away is what I'd guess. And I was like, what in the heck? And I'm like, this thing is listening. And then it turned back into a tree. And I continue to watch. I continue to listen. And then this time it turned into this giant. And Ellie, this was truly a giant. This is not an 8-footer. It's not a 10-footer. This thing is way bigger than that, brother. And I'm talking like 20 to 30 feet tall.
Dang.
And I'm looking at it. It repositioned. It walked around and it made several strides around behind the tree, and it went to the other side. And it was further apart this time than it was from the other one. And it was listening. It was leaning in, and I could tell that this thing was listening. And so I thought, well, if it can hear this prayer that these cats are praying for me, then it can hear me somehow. And I'm staring it down. And I think up until this second, it was not aware that I could see it. And I said, I see you. And when I said, I see you, it stopped it. He just got real frozen. And he was like, you talking to me type thing. And I told him, I said, I don't know what you got away with down here, but there's a new sheriff in town. And they're bringing teams of kids. We're bringing teams of people down here. We're going to rescue so many kids. I rebuke you in the mighty name of Jesus. I'm here on sacred space. You got no business listening to this prayer. This is none of your business. And when I started speaking to him and telling this thing that it was no longer going to get away with what it's doing to children, it changed, and it became very aggressive. It started rocking back and forth like this. And it became very, very aggressive. It put his hands on his knees first, and it put his shoulders up, and it rocked back and forth like this. And then it became angry. And I'm looking at this thing, and it's making all these terrible gestures, and it's scary looking. And it's telling me, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to wipe you guys out. It became extremely violent looking. Yes, sir. And it was at about that point. And again, people have their hands on my shoulders. Everybody's praying around me. And when I'm talking to it, I'm talking about this tone of voice. I'm like, I see you, and you're not going to get away with this thing anymore. I declare it in the name of Jesus. We're going to rescue every kid down here. We're going to shut you down. We have a right to be here. These people are indigenous. This is sacred space. We're saying all those things. And this thing starts throwing a fit. My son comes over, and he brings the journal. And I said, Ben, turn around and tell me what you see up there on top of that ridge. And he's like, where? And I said, right up there, turn around and look. And my son turned around, he looks up there at it. He said, Dad, that's a freaking giant. I said, yeah, it is. And he goes, whoa. And I told him, I said, watch this. I said, you see this? This is my son. We have generations here. We rescue kids. The Lord himself has sent us here, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it started throwing a walleye fit. My son is watching this now. He's 34 years old.
It's my
and
age.
he's got his hand on my shoulder like, whoa. So Jerry Sellers, who's an executive pastor, he's a little bit of ways from his head. He's kind of, I can see that he's looking at us like, what are you guys looking at? I said, Jerry, come here. And so again, all of these people are praying. They're completely oblivious that we're looking at this thing. Jerry comes over. I said, Jerry, just chill out, man. But you're not going to believe what it is I'm looking at. I said, turn around and tell me what you see up there. And he turns around and he looks and he yelled, it's a freaking giant. And when he did, the people stopped praying and they look at him and they looked back up towards the hill. And whenever that happened, this thing stood up and it turned around. It made 3 strides. And as it was going over the edge of the ridge, as it turned to go, and it was like going fast now. It was just 3 quick strides and it was completely gone. It was like tree, giant tree, giant tree, giant, and then it was gone. So yeah, I mean, people that are praying for me, I asked them, they're like, what's going on? Because we were all excited, bro. Right. And I told them, I said, guys, watch this. I said, guys, do y'all know anything about a giant in this part of the world? Which there are giant footprints there everywhere, even in the hotel that we were staying at. It's got a giant stone that has a giant footprint in it. It's part of the forest.
There's one in North Carolina somewhere. There's a stone. I don't think it's a footprint. I think it's maybe a handprint, and it has writing all over the stone. I cannot remember the name of it, but if you looked it up, you could probably find it in North Carolina.
Structure there on the pyramid that I was telling you about, which we went on the pyramid. There are giant footprints in the stone on the actual on the actual pyramid itself. And I said, guys, y'all know anything about a giant out here? And they all told me as pastors, yeah, there's one that lives on top of that ridge. Oh, no.
Oh, wow. You know, it's interesting. Have you ever heard of Judicola?
Oh, this is it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah. I mean, it's the same point.
What was his, where did his happen?
I believe it's either North Carolina or South Carolina. I think it's North Carolina. I'm almost positive. I mean, I could look it up, but Judicola was a giant, North Carolina. There's a big rock with allegedly his handprint. I was there and we filmed there, and very, very interesting. But the same thing, you know, the legend of Judicola the giant. You know, we keep hearing all this stuff. Yeah, but I mean, for you to actually see one, and your son, and then a friend of yours, and then everybody else, they're all looking at this thing. I've never heard that before. I mean, that's really unbelievable. So let me ask you something. In your opinion, is the veil thinning?
Yes. Yes, the veil is thinning very much. I think the closer and closer that we get to the end, more and more and more, you know, even among all the nations, that the feet of the nations will be mixed between clay and iron. These are the days of Noah. This is very much, you know, the whole Nephilim thing, the whole sea war thing.
Yeah.
And they've been around. We all know that they've been around when they were around before the flood and after the flood. But now they have so many people that actively work with them on so many different levels of governments throughout the world. In LA, this is what it was actually in rescuing children that sent me down the rabbit hole, because I would rescue a child in Nepal that would say the same exact thing that a child in Mexico would say, that would say the same exact thing that a child in South America would say, that the same exact thing that a child in Africa would say. And we started coming across kids that were blonde-headed, blue-eyed kids all over the world that were from South Africa, that their name began with E-L. And that was the first indication to me, like, where did you come from? And why are you doing here? Why are you in Uganda? Why are you in Tanzania? What is all this? And this is, you know, again, we've been doing this for 30 years, and 25 years ago, before Al Gore gave us the internet, thank God for him, we had no way to, we had no understanding whatsoever. But now, you know, with guys who have forged the way for us, like what you have, and so many others as well, I mean, this thing is becoming more and more and more common knowledge among people who are actually actively engaged in these things.
Okay.
You know,
I am going to stop it there, because the main thing I wanted you to hear was the giant that he saw. And here's what he said. So he talked about this about a year ago at the NRB, which is the National Religious Broadcasters Association. I think it's like in Nashville, Tennessee every year, or something like that. Or maybe it moves around. Last year it was in Tennessee, and he was talking to a person named Tony Merkel, who also is in ministry, and that he has a podcast. That's what he talks about often. Tony Merkel, he talks about these encounters and that's what Marzulli does. The guy who was interviewing him, he interviews people who've had encounters. And when we talk about the Kandahar giant, L.A. Marzulli was actually the one who broke that story, and he interviewed people who were there, because this involves the army. But anyway, so Troy Brewer ended up talking about it at the NRB while they were broadcasting live with Tony Merkel. And he said, normally, I wouldn't say this publicly. He said, because people think you're insane. You tell them you saw a giant that turned into a tree, and it was listening to our prayers, and it got mad when I started to tell it, you don't have a right to be here, and I'm going to rescue kids. He said, that sounds insane. But the fact that my son was there as a witness, this other pastor saw it, and then everybody else saw it too. And then I asked them, and they say, oh yeah, a giant lives up there on that ridge. He said, I can talk about it because there are witnesses. It's not just me going rogue, and I could have, you know, made it up or been out of my mind or whatever. So I find it interesting that, again, when you read about the giants that were of the Bible, and they were always evil, and then fast forward to today, how many thousands of years later, and this thing makes itself seen while people are praying. And then look at the way it reacted to the name of Jesus. That should clear up any confusion. Like, if you're like, yeah, I think giants were real or are real, because I know they don't teach it in history. They don't teach it in your textbooks. It's been deliberately obfuscated. And even Abraham Lincoln, obviously several hundred years ago, even he talked about the bones of the giants. There's a quote by him. I can't remember it word for word. But they've dug up giant bones all over the Americas and other parts of the world. And we talked about that when we talked about the gap theory, that maybe the bones of the giants have been relabeled and repurposed as dinosaur skeletons. That's possible. Or I've also heard, I can't vet this, and I can't say this is for sure, but someone who worked formerly for the Smithsonian, they said they knew for a fact that giant bones were taken out on a ship and then just dumped into the ocean. So we can't vet that. That may not be true, but that's another theory. And here's the interesting thing is that almost every museum has dinosaur bones or fossils of some kind on display. And yet it's amazing how none of them have the bones of giants, which you would think would for sure be on display, right? People would come from all over to see a 15-foot giant skeleton. And we'll get into more of those. But so I find it interesting. It manifests and reacts to the name of Jesus, which should tell you the origin of this thing. It's the same with the aliens, right? Don't mention the name of Jesus because they'll freak out. They don't like it. They'll react. So that should tell you the origin of this stuff. There aren't friendly aliens out there. There aren't friendly giants. This stuff is evil in nature. So in Mexico, and Mexico, so when he talked about it, the locals obviously knew. They were like, yeah, there's a giant that lives up there. Now, the other video I have, I don't know if this is the same part of Mexico. I have no idea. I'm not even sure we know for sure where this was filmed. But I'm going to read a couple things to you. And then once it mentions the video, I'll play the video. It's very, very short. It's not going to be that long. All right. So other reported giant sightings in rural Mexico. And you see a similar pattern. These have been collected from testimonies and discussions. Someone said both my parents from different parts of Mexico recall seeing a giant walking around at night in rural areas. So the locations mentioned, I probably cannot pronounce these because I'm white. I'm actually not even going to try. So anyway, similarities to Brewer's story. It was a rural area. It was mountainous. It was at night. In his case, I think it was during the day, but I don't know. Multiple independent witnesses and seen as real beings, not myths. So here's the thing. If you want to dismiss it, then you have to take the position of you think everyone who's ever reported seeing one is nuts. There are people who are insane. Let's not act like they're not. And there are people who like acid and LSD, and they can become convinced there's a dragon guarding their fridge or whatever, So yeah, we make room for that. We understand there are lunatics out there, but everybody, you think 100% of these alleged sightings or encounters can be dismissed as someone's insane or using like some kind of hallucinogenic drugs. That's a bigger conspiracy theory than believing that some people actually saw what they say they saw, and they're not all making it up. You might have someone who made it up because they thought there was money to be made. People have done that with Sasquatch suits, right? Oh, I filmed my buddy. He put on a Bigfoot costume and walked through the woods, and I filmed it, and we're just trying to get our 15 minutes of fame. So people, those things happen, but does that mean that can you account for every instance, every sighting, and every encounter can be dismissed? No, unless again, that makes you a conspiracy theorist if you think 100% of it's all fabricated. And you gotta erase a lot of history. And then the biggest problem you have is fighting with the Bible, which has stood the test of time, which is the one source of complete truth that we have in this world is God's word. And there are giants in that book. So, and this is the same earth. That's the thing. This is the same earth. It's been thousands of years, but it's the same earth. So naturally, you would expect to find some bones, right? Now, I know a living giant, that's different. But again, this earth, like we think take the and I'm going to keep reading in a second, but consider the ocean for a second. How much of it has been explored? Less than 10%. We don't know what all's in the ocean. And the earth, we think we've covered the surface of the earth. We haven't been everywhere. I guarantee you, I would bet my life there's going to come stuff out of the Amazon that they're going to be like, we didn't know this was here. Or if someone does know, it's been contained until later on that stuff's going to be revealed. Like, I actually watched the movie The Lost City of Z the other day. Has Charlie Hunnam in it, and it's about a true story. Percy Fawcett thought he found an ancient city in the Amazon when everyone said it is impossible that anyone could have lived there. Definitely not have built a city. And yet he found pottery and stuff, and he went back several times, and then he disappeared. Him and his son, and then whoever, there might have been someone else with them. Yeah, I know his friend's son, or his son's friend. They all just disappeared. That was in like 1920 something. To this day, no evidence has ever been found. So we don't know what happened to them. They could have been killed by native people who were violent. They could have been eaten by something. They just disappeared into thin air. Contact just got cut off. So anyway, it's so dense, we don't know what all's in there. So to think that we know everything that is living on this earth, they're discovering new species all the time. We don't know everything that is living on this earth. We have not been everywhere. It's like, I think it's funny when they say like, this animal's extinct now. I'm like, oh yeah, you guys, you looked everywhere. You're so sure that it's extinct. So you're telling me you've looked everywhere? No, I don't buy it. You don't know for sure. So anyway, when it comes to giants in rural areas, up in mountains, in caves, or potentially underground, it's very hard to say that's impossible. Very, very hard. Anyway, what did I read last? Okay, so yeah, this is what people say they've seen. Cave giant footage from the Baja. Okay, so it's Baja or Cabo. Viral footage allegedly showing a huge humanoid inside a cave. That's what I'm going to show you in a second. Discussed as possibly near tourist areas in Baja California. Interesting. Massive humanoid proportions appearing partially hidden inside terrain or a cave. And the overlap with what Troy Brewer saw is that it's hidden in the landscape. It's the large scale, which is far beyond human, and it's a mountain or a cave environment, which seems to be a consistent theme. For some reason, when there's a mountain and a cave, that's where you're seeing these things. So I'm going to play the video for you. Again, this came out before AI was on the scene. Play. You can see a figure in a cave opening looking around. That would be pretty easy to hide in, I think. This person is zoomed way in. Some people have said, obviously, this account that posted it is called
This
Squatch.
is not exactly what you expect to see on
Squatch Watchers. I don't believe that is a squatch. That looked like a giant to me. Here's the thing. If I didn't know the Bible talked about giants and believe that, then, and if I didn't trust what Troy Brewer is saying, if I didn't believe the Kandahar giant situation actually happened, then I would probably watch that footage and dismiss it. I'd be like, whatever, that even if it's not AI, because AI didn't exist then, I would say that it's someone, I don't know, found a way to doctor footage, which you can obviously, but again, they've run it. They're like, this is not like CGI. The video isn't. So the video is real. The question is just where exactly is this and who was the person who filmed it? That's what they're not sure about. But if I didn't, again, if I didn't have any background knowledge, I would probably, if I ran across that, I would dismiss it. But since I've actually studied the subject, I have multiple books full of stories of giant bones that have been unearthed. There are pictures. L.A. Marzulli was the one, again, he broke the Kandahar giant story, which I'll tell you more about, but he also he found a picture on he lives in California. He found a picture on Catalina Island of a guy by the name of Ralph Glidden. And in the picture, you have Ralph Glidden, who was like an archaeologist or, that type of thing. And he had dug up a giant skeleton, giant. And it's pictured there. He's there with the shovel standing above it. It's in the earth still, but you can see it. It's massive. So Marzulli said something to the museum people, and he's like, "Can I don't know." He asked them about it. Where did this come from? And they said, "Oh, actually, we don't know. We didn't even notice that was in there," because I think he was flipping through books or something. It wasn't like on display. So he took a picture of it, right? And it's a good thing he took a picture of it, because he went back to the museum later and the picture was there, but they cropped it. They cropped out the giant. They kept the picture of Ralph Glidden. You can tell there's a shovel by him and there's ground that he'd been digging. They cropped out the giant. Why would you do that unless there's a specific reason you want these stories covered up? And why do you want them covered up? Because the existence of giants is further proof that the Bible is true and real. And if you are part of a satanic establishment which controls education, entertainment, politics, media, all of it, then you're going to cover this stuff up. And instead, let's go dinosaurs. Let's go whatever else, but not giants. And also, if they're still here, or some of them, or there's going to be a reemergence, I don't know everything that's going to go down during the tribulation, but it'll be insane. It'll be nuts. So if Nephilim are part of what happens, part of the beasts of the earth that come forth, like Revelation 13 tells us, I don't know exactly what that looks like. Doesn't sound good. Who knows what kind of hell is going to be released on this earth. So it's all don't look here. Don't look at what the Bible says. Instead, evolution. Instead, whatever Charles Darwin said. Instead, the earth is 65 million years old and dinosaurs and X, Y, and Z. And I haven't been completely convinced that dinosaurs were not real, because I don't necessarily see their existence as a conflict with the Bible. They could have existed, I think, and they could have been wiped out in the flood. Or if we go with the gap theory, they could have been part of the earth before the recreation, if that happened. But it is interesting. Dinosaurs are always pushed with evolution typically, and they're on display everywhere. And yet no giant bones, which have been found all over the place, to say nothing of the stories Native Americans have of how when they came to the land, there were giants here, red-haired giants who were terrifying. They were sexually deviant. They were horrifying to the ears, horrifying to smell, horrifying to, they were constantly fighting with them. They were cannibalistic. Even people who came here in the 1500s, like from Spain or wherever, they wrote about it down in, what's that called? It starts with a P. I can't remember. They wrote about it, that there were giants and they were awful. So all those people are nuts and they all made it up, or has it been covered up? Anyway, let's keep reading. Did I read this yet? No. Okay. So indigenous and historical Mexican traditions, in ancient accounts, they describe giants called Kinametsin, whatever, an Aztec tradition mentioned in discussions in the same thread. So the descriptions are they're huge humanoid beings associated with mountains, ancient structures, and pre-human or early human eras. Again, who made the pyramids? Who put the massive structures together in Peru? The Silistani things in on the border of Peru and Bolivia. So many megalithic sites. Easter Island is one of them. Stonehenge. So many megalithic sites that can't even be done today with how the stones are cut so precisely with no mortar. You can't fit human hair between them. How did they move them? Some of them, there's granite and things that weren't even natural to that area. They had to be brought in from someone else. And that would they use an ox cart? Something that weighs 40 tons? You want to tell me manpower did that with a chisel and they moved it? No. Giants make sense. Giants that are evil with access to fallen angel technology. That's what checks every box. That's the only explanation that checks every box. Everything else is just like an evolutionary type godless theory that I'm sure is going to be pushed, and it will seem very, very convincing, because I would bet my life on it. They'll produce artifacts or manuscripts or something that's going to make it look very convincing. Yes, this explains the pyramids. This explains Stonehenge. This can explain X, Y, and Z, but it's not going to be giants that are evil, and it's not going to involve fallen angels, which we know happened in Genesis 6. They will leave the biblical narrative out, and they will give you a false narrative that will seemingly check every box. There's a great deception coming, a very big delusion, the Bible tells us. All right, so next. I already read that. So it's in the same region where these stories come from. The same giants tied to the land concept, often linked to specific locations, not random wandering creatures. That makes sense, because even demonic spirits like principalities, you find them in a certain region. Like in the book of Daniel, the prince of Persia withstood the angel 21 days. That was a spirit assigned to that area. So in this case, you have a giant, which again, I don't believe is a natural creature, or it's not a person. It looks humanoid, but it's it's the offspring of a demonic entity and a person. And who knows, it could be several generations removed, but that's still what it is. Not made in the image of God. It does not have a redeemable soul, and it's evil. So same with evil spirits bound to specific locations. You see the same thing, it seems like here. South America, parallel reports from cryptozoology and anecdotal accounts. You have jungle regions like French Guinea mentioned in discussions. Reports of large humanoids, like whatever that thing is. I'm not going to try to say that word. Oh, the overlap is there's remote wilderness. They are huge in size. The sightings are rare, but local knowledge predates outsiders. So again, you can find out everywhere you go. You can find out stuff by talking to locals. Google may not tell you. ChatGPT may not tell you. But if you talk to local people, that's where it's like restaurants. You ever been to a restaurant that's a hole in the wall and it looks like there's no way they pass like inspections, and yet the food is amazing? It's not going to come recommended on TripAdvisor or Yelp or whatever, maybe, but the locals can tell you, oh, that place is lit. They've got the best barbecue you'll ever have there. That type of thing. The locals know. It doesn't always make it mainstream, though. So the pattern from people reacting to Troy Brewer's story, because when this went viral, I think one person did they commented on it or did a reaction to it, and it got like 12 million views. And then you had a bunch of people, as soon as Troy Brewer talked about what he saw, you had other people saying, dang, well, now I feel comfortable to talk about what I saw. So of course, not everybody's probably telling the truth, but some people are. So you had comments, testimonies, and similar claims. They described giants as blending into the surroundings, looking like trees or rock formations, only visible when moving, appearing briefly, then disappearing, living in mountains or caves, and rarely seen up close. So the tree to a humanoid shift that Brewer described is actually one of the most repeated patterns in these kinds of stories. So I think not that I would have not, believed him, but that gives, I think, further support to what he said, that you're not insane, Troy. You're not the only person who's seen that. You're not the only person who said that. That's apparently a common thing to see in these kind of scenarios. So what stands out when you compare everything? When you line them all up, the recurring pattern is surprisingly consistent. They are location specific. Almost always they're in mountains or remote jungles or caves. So kind of like they want to stay hidden, right? The size, they're typically described as 15 to 30 feet tall, not just tall humans. Again, even if you're like, I saw something 8 feet tall, that could be a person. It's not common, but it could be. Who's that like Asian guy who played in the NBA? I think he was over 8 feet tall. There's a freaking Chinese girl, which all the comments, it was so funny. She's like 7 foot something, and everyone's like, bro, they made her in a lab. Which they probably did. So even that 7, 8 feet, that's possible. Something 15 feet, 20, 30, that's not human. Ain't no way. The tallest person ever was 8'11", I think, that Robert Wadlow, and he died at like 22. He had health problems. He had braces on his legs. He was unhealthy because he had gigantism. Like, you can't live long. You're not agile. So these things, and again, that was less than 9 feet there. So these things are much bigger than that. Next. So camouflage or blending is common. They appear as trees, shadows, or rock formations. The visibility behavior, they're seen when it moves or you stare long enough, which is what Troy was doing. Otherwise, they blend in. They're associated with fear or danger. Stories are tied to missing people, spiritual activity, and don't go there warnings. So again, I feel like that clears up the origin of these things. Obviously, anything that's big would incite fear, but why are they popping up where there are, hey, that's a taboo place? Again, the indigenous people, they know you don't go there, something lives there, and it's tied to spiritual things. It's not just natural. Well, there might be some things on this earth. Yeah, but are they natural? Did God make them? And in the case of the Nephilim, the answer is no, God did not make them. Satan concocted that ungodly union, which again, I think is what got the earth flooded and destroyed. Next. What people claim they see. People who believe it say the figure is too large to be a normal human, proportioned like a humanoid. It appears partially hidden in the cave, blending with the rock or shadow. Notice how that lines up almost exactly with Troy Brewer's description and other reports. So it's not, it may sound crazy because it's the first time you've heard of it, but it's not actually uncommon what he told. Well-known giant or cave mountain stories. So the Kandahar giant, this is what I kept touching on. Claimed U.S. soldiers encountered a giant emerging from a cave location in the mountains of Afghanistan. The features, it had red hair. That's consistent with Native Americans, and we're talking a completely different part of the world. It lived in a cave in the remote terrain. Now, let me tell you more about the Kandahar giant. So, again, Marzulli was the one who broke the story. He interviewed multiple people who were part of the army unit. Here's what happened, if I remember it correctly. This was in the early 2000s. So like your lifetime and my lifetime, I think it was like 2007 or maybe a little earlier. It may have been 2002. But anyway, so the army, I think a unit went missing, if I remember correctly. So they sent another unit to go look for them. And this is when we were in Afghanistan. So they found evidence of this unit. And this was up on a mountain near a cave, and they found army supplies or whatever. They're like, okay, they were here. So as they're looking through the stuff, trying to figure out what happened, where is our unit? This giant comes out of the cave screaming, and it had like a spear or a javelin in its hand. And obviously probably the leader of this unit went forward toward it. And this giant speared him like a fish and held him up. And so when that happened, they opened fire and essentially decapitated it, killed it. Here comes a chopper. They let down a net. They put the body in a net, take it away. And then when that unit gets back to base, they're told that didn't happen. You're not to talk about this. So obviously some people talked about it, and they crossed paths with L.A. Marzulli. He broke the story. He protected their identities, because you could probably get yourself killed. If you're in the military and you're told, something happened, and you're told that didn't happen, don't talk about it, you're probably going to get yourself killed. So he protected their identities. But multiple people told him, yes, like I was there, I saw it, that happened. So then they said they went into the cave and there were more giants in there. I forget if it was 2 or 3 or 4 more. I think one more they killed, and then 1 or 2 of them like straight up disappeared. Like there was no way out of the cave but going by the people, and somehow they disappeared. So, but again, it never happened, right? But it's interesting that, they said this giant had red hair. which is what the Native Americans said. In fact, is that my next story? Let me see. Yes, Lovelock Cave. This is in Nevada. So this is based on a Paiute tradition about red-haired giants called the Sitika. So they were said to have lived in Lovelock Cave. The story includes humans driving them out of the cave being burned and sealed. Again, a giant plus cave plus isolation. There's a girl, Sarah Winnemucca, who wrote a book about this because that was her tribe, the Paiutes. She was a Native American of the Paiute tribe, and she wrote a book that these giants, they were real. She didn't write it as a fantasy, like a fantasy children's book. She wrote it as like, this happened. There were red-haired giants. We were always fighting with them. And eventually the Native Americans backed them into Lovelock Cave and put a bunch of brush at the entrance of the cave, lit it on fire, and it killed the giants. In fact, if you go to Lovelock Cave today, unless they've scrubbed it, but I think still to this day, you can see the entrance at the ceiling of the cave looks like it was burned. And for a long time, there was a handprint there, a massive handprint. L.A. Marzulli was there when it was still there, and then he went back later and the handprint was gone. So I don't know if they've destroyed evidence of a fire, but they have removed the handprint. And they also found a giant like sandal type shoe. And based on the dimensions of the shoe, you're guessing someone maybe roughly 15 feet tall would wear a shoe that size. So again, red-haired giants, to say nothing of the fact, I live in Ohio, and there are Indian mounds all over the place. I grew up hearing that the these are Indian mounds. The Native Americans built them. But I actually went to a conference called the Mounds Conference back in 2014. Marzulli was one of the speakers there. They've dug into these mounds, and they have found an altar that looks like a sacrificial altar. They have found giant skeletons, and wouldn't you guess, red hair. And yet then the whole narrative it gets changed, and we're told the Native Americans built them. I think they built on top of them, but there was something already there. And Native Americans themselves have said, we didn't build these mounds. There was something else here. People that were here before us, we didn't build them. Ohio has a serpent mound, has an octagon mound, all kinds of mounds, Chillicothe, Newark, Ohio. In fact, there's even a mound on the road my parents live on where I grew up. They're all over the place. And then Ohio's not, the only place. You can go to plenty of other states and there are mounds there as well, or different kinds of earthworks. So this isn't like just something someone made up. There's literal physical evidence for this stuff. It's just that for whatever reason, you got to question why the existence of the giants has been covered up. All right, I already read that. I actually don't think I have that much left to read. Let me see what's next. So the Mesoamerican or Mexican traditions, which again, Troy Brewer was in Mexico when he saw this. The other video I showed you was in Mexico. And the locals were like, yeah, we know about this. So giants like the Kinametsin, often tied to mountains, hidden places, and pre-human civilizations. Again, they predate the Native Americans. And if you go to Peru and you go look at Sacsayhuaman, the walls there, these megalithic stones, they're massive stones. They are cut. They're squished together almost like the stone was at one point a marshmallow. They're pushed together so tightly you couldn't put a credit card in there or hair, and there's no mortar. And then on top of that kind of workmanship, which is impossible even today with lasers and stuff, on top of that, you can see another builder came along, and no disrespect, I don't know if it was Mayans or Aztecs, I don't remember which came first, but their workmanship is trash compared to the stones they built on. But you can tell there are clearly three different builders. The first one's perfect, impossible to do. Second one's, they used mortar and it's not very impressive. And then the third one, same thing. Very messy, used mortar, much smaller stones, clearly three different builders. And it predates even Mayans and Aztecs and things like that. So someone was there first and somehow was able to move massive stones and do some kind of miracles with engineering and architecture that we can't even do today. So you got to ask yourself how. All right. So modern anecdotes like Troy Brewer's story in Chiapas, or however you say it, it follows the same pattern that a giant is tied to a specific mountain location, just like Kandahar and other parts of the world. A few more to read here. In the Appalachian Mountains, in the Native American stories, this is actually not super far where I'm from. They have stories of stone giants, moon-eyed people frequently tied to caves, mountains, and underground spaces. I wouldn't be surprised if there is some stuff underground that we don't know about it yet. I bet people who serve the devil know, but normal people probably don't. South America, the Amazon and the Andes, reports of large humanoids. They're said to live in the dense jungle, and they hide in caves or remote terrain. So it seems there's a consistent pattern here, and it's different areas. So what Troy Brewer says locals told him. So according to his retelling, the locals believed there was a giant living on that mountain or ridge. He claimed they said children or people had gone missing and were believed to be given to or taken by the giant. The mountain already had a reputation, not just a random sighting. People already avoided it. So he didn't say anything that wasn't already assumed to be true by the local people. One more thing about the Kandahar giant, a guy from Afghanistan, he was born there. He's been in America forever. His dad, who also obviously was from Afghanistan, when his dad was a boy, he went up to the mountain where the Kandahar giant lived, and he saw a massive like footprint, and it scared him, and he didn't know what he was looking at. So he went home and he told his mom, like, man, I was up on that mountain and I saw this like massive footprint. And his mom was like, don't go up there. Come to find out, his mom was a witch. She had some kind of satanic tattoo on her forehead. And she would go up to the mountain and leave a goat up there periodically. And she thought it was a way of giving an offering to this giant so that it wouldn't come down for the mountain looking for food and wouldn't come after her or her family. So they call it a jinn in that part of the world, which basically is a spirit of some kind. And she would give offerings to it. And even the dad said, like, she was into witchcraft, straight up witchcraft. He said he saw brooms in his house when he was a kid that would be moving by themselves. And she was like controlling, like basically there's a retard in that movie Accepted. It came out probably 20 years ago. And he's like, I want to learn to blow things up with my mind. And everyone's like, what a weirdo. And then by the end of the movie, he blows up someone's car with his mind. But essentially, like, that's what his mom was doing. She was into witchcraft, and she would control brooms and stuff and make them clean her house. He said, I think there were maybe little spirits that were moving the brooms. I don't know, but I know that she did it in her witchcraft. So she knew about the giant, and yet she thought she could make peace with it by giving it food. So anyway, back to people going missing or being given to giants. Again, this is another part of the world. Afghanistan and Mexico are not close together. So where you see the same behavior, you see the same kind of spirit. So what the actual Chiapas regional folklore says, there are giants in Mesoamerican tradition, ancient traditions that talk about giants, like that word I keep having to say. They're described as huge humans, pre-flood or ancient beings, which that tracks with the Bible. The giants were here before the flood, and they were builders of large structures. So, where do you think pyramids and other things came from that people could not possibly have built back then? Spirit mountain entity beliefs. In southern Mexico, there are strong beliefs in mountain spirits or guardians. Certain mountains are believed to have entities attached to them and be spiritually occupied, which I think that's exactly what this is. And this is the last thing. They also talk about shapeshifters, beings that can appear as animals or human-like forms associated with remote areas, fear, and avoidance zones. Don't go there locations. Some areas are known locally as dangerous, spirit inhabited. Stories may include people disappearing, something unseen taking them. And that's, again, consistent in all parts of the world. And so is shape-shifting. When people get into becoming a shaman, it doesn't matter if you're Native American, South American, Middle Eastern, African, like it doesn't matter. Shamans all essentially do the same thing. And they get into shape-shifting, which I know it sounds insane, but it's the occult. You get into witchcraft, weird stuff happens. That's, in fact, anyone who, if you know Native Americans who are like legit, like not generations removed from any Native traditions, but like people who are like straight up Native American, they won't even say the word shapeshifter. They call them or they won't say skinwalker, which is a shapeshifter. They say SWs because they believe if you say it, then you're basically inviting them to have something to do with you, and they don't want that because they know they're evil. Chief Joseph Riverwind, I think I've shared what he said before. So he's Native, like bona fide Native American. I forget what tribe. When he was in the army as a much younger man, he and some friends also in the army were driving home after a night out, and on the side of the road they see a deer. But when they got close to it, they were like, he knew, he's like, that's not a deer. He said the legs weren't right. It had human eyes. It was not a deer. I knew, being Native American, knowing what the shamans do, knowing about shapeshifting, about skinwalkers, he knew exactly what it was. And so did at least one other person in the car. And so he said his initial reaction was, what did I do? Why is this thing crossing paths with me? What did I do? And I forget, he talked to someone about it, like an elder or something like that from his tribe, and they were like, I don't think you did anything to cross paths with it. I think you just happened to, because he was like freaking out, like, what have I gotten into and I didn't mean to? Why is this thing being shown to me? But and I've told you too about the gazelle story about, and in fact, my pastor told this, which is crazy because he never talks about stuff like this. But he, I think this guy was a missionary, if I remember correctly. He was somewhere in Africa, and he had to rent, like, check out a gun, essentially like a library. You go check out a book, and so your name is on that. And so he went to check out a gun while he was there to go hunting. So his name was on the gun rental, and he shot a gazelle. So the next day, the little village he's in is buzzing that it was like the chief of the town or whatever. Maybe it was a tribe, the chief of the tribe, his wife had gotten shot and killed. And so they matched ballistics, and they bring in this missionary, and they said, the gun that shot this chief's wife is like the gun you checked out yesterday and you were hunting with. So tell us what happened. And he was like, I didn't shoot a person. He's like, I shot a gazelle. And they said, okay. So they were like, you're not in trouble. We know you didn't murder anyone. She was a witch. This chief's wife was a witch. She was into witchcraft. She was a shapeshifter, and she would shapeshift into a gazelle. So what you shot was a gazelle. You thought it was a gazelle. So you're not, you're not in trouble for murder. She got herself killed by doing witchcraft. So I know it's crazy, but it's a real thing. And the more you talk to people, read their body language, look at their eyes. Are they making it up, or did they actually see something? And yeah, it probably freaked them out. And a lot of people won't talk about it because everyone thinks you're nuts if you do. If you say, I saw a giant in Mexico, or I saw a deer that wasn't a deer, or whatever, people think you're insane and they won't listen to you, which is, again, why I appreciate L.A. Marzulli, because he will give people a platform. And obviously not everyone who's come to him he believes, because he'll read their body language as well. But there are people who've had real encounters, and they're telling the truth. They're not insane. So I'm done with part 2. Let me pop these up, and then I'll take a short break before part 3. Those are the ways to contact or find me or follow. If you watch on any of these platforms, please subscribe. And there's my email address if you would want to contact me for any reason, if you have a story or anything like that, or if you want to support Amber Alert Podcast, those are ways that you can. And you also, there's my email address if you would want to be a sponsor or anything of that nature. I had a couple people reach out to me about interviews with certain people. So I may do that maybe as early as next week. I haven't ironed out the details yet. So anyone with an interesting story, I would be happy to talk to. Probably won't be in an episode. It would be its own little segment. Anyway, that's it for part 2. It's 6:25. I'm going to give myself 20 minutes because I want to eat something. I'll come back at 6:45 and we'll do part 3, which is where we'll get into the Bible. All right. Until then, I will see you in 20 minutes. Goodbye.